welcome back. It is the end of August, so all of our plants in the garden are starting to dry up. We're going to get started on tearing down and getting ready for fall. So this video is going to be stretched out over the next couple of weeks as we finish up with some of these different plants. We already had the green beans and peas that were here that are done. And we have made a pile on the back side of the garden of those plants to let them dry out. When everything's done and pulled out, we're going to burn those to get rid of them, and we'll clean up the garden. But for now, we're just going to work on what is dead. And this tomato plant here has some disease to it, and we have not gotten any tomatoes off of it that have survived, so we're going to pull that out and we'll get rid of that separately. That way, if there is a fungus on it, we don't spread it to our tomatoes next year. We're going to start with the squash and pull the last of the squash that are ready off of it as I pull the rest of it out of the ground. As you can see, we got plenty of squash left on the last picking. Some of them are a little small, but that's alright. We'll still be able to process them and feed them to our son. Luckily, he likes squash, so we are good on that front. As you can see behind me, we have all of the squash plants pulled up, piled up. We're going to let those dry out, let the sun bake them for a few weeks. We'll rotate them to make sure that everything's drying out fine, and then when we get a day that's a little rainy and we pull all of the plastic up in our garden, we're going to go ahead and burn those. They don't break down quite as well in the compost pile, so this is our way of getting some of the plant back into the soil. The plastic in our garden we'll talk about multiple times again. But it's new this year. We're trying it for the first time, and it has worked really well at keeping the weeds down, keeping the soil moist underneath, and it has been a great addition to our garden. So next year we're definitely going to do the whole garden with it. So we are still in the process of tearing down some of the garden. As you can see, I got rid of the first tomato plant that was diseased, and it destroyed everything that we had supporting it, so that is all pretty much garbage. Our last plant here still has some tomatoes on it, but we are losing some to disease and to pests, and we're just done with tomatoes for the season. We've ate our fair share, so I'm going to start pulling this one out. I'll save any of the last couple tomatoes that we have on it, and it'll be one less thing that we have. So I'm just going to hack away at this piece by piece, that way we can remove it, and any fresh tomatoes that are ready I can harvest. I'm just going to make a pile for now. But these all on top have holes in them from bugs. As you can see, our tomato plants grow very well. Those are probably the last two tomatoes that we'll get off of it. Everything else looks... So this is how we've kind of always grown tomato plants. Start with a cage, and then when they get too big, we add a stake beside it, and then eventually you have to tie it off, and it's worked well for the most part. But as you can see over here, it did not work well. I tried everything to reinforce this tomato plant. I pruned half of it off, and it has destroyed all of it. We have a couple of ideas to try something different next year, but if you have any tips that you really love when growing tomatoes, be sure to put them in the comments and we might try it out. Fall cleanup is definitely a multi-day process depending on when things finish growing. As you can see here, our Brussels sprouts are quite sad. No matter how much I fought, the caterpillars just destroyed them. Now we did get some Brussels sprout growth, but I'll show you here they aren't worth trying to keep, and I think they're just done growing for the season. So we're gonna go ahead and tear those out. So this is all the bigger our Brussels sprouts got. This is one of the biggest ones that we have, so by the time you try to pick the dozen that we have and clean them up, you really have nothing left. So we're just going to scrap the Brussels sprouts this year. Maybe try and do some more research to see if I can do anything differently, and hopefully next year we can get some. So we're going to let those dry out for a few days with the rest of the dry plants that were kind of piling up back there. I might hit these again to try and kill some of the caterpillars that are on there, just so there aren't as many around. But that's it for the Brussels sprouts this year. While we're out here, I'm going to go ahead and pick what seems to be the last of our bell peppers, and we'll go ahead and pull those stakes and the plants out of the ground when we're done. And we'll almost be ready to do the final cleanup. We got some pretty good sized bell peppers, but it is getting a little too dark out now and my son is ready for bed, so we're gonna call it a night. So now that it's daylight and we can see what we're doing again, we'll get the rest of these peppers pulled and pull the stakes out of the ground and get a little closer to the fall cleanup. Never got cages because they're a lot smaller. The pine trees here definitely shade them and affect their growth, but we're working to fix that and hopefully next year they grow a little better. cut down the corn for some fall decorations, and we can get our garden plastic picked up. So as you can see here, some of these corn stalks grew a second set of roots, and they grew down through the plastic. So we're going to have to try and pull some of these roots out before we can lift up the plastic. This is a perfect example of why we have to tear some of these out, because all of this root system here is just dug into our plastic, and it is quite difficult to get some of this worked up. So now that we have most of those troublesome corn stalks kind of dug up, we have to pull all of the metal stakes out of our garden plastic. We have them every 4 feet or so to hold it down, just so the wind wouldn't pick any of it up. So we're going to pull those and pull the garden plastic off row by row, and we'll get it stacked up and stored away for winter. So you can kind of see here, this is how we had the plastic laid out. That would have been our corn, and then our 4 spots for the squash. In the garden, we are extremely pleased with how moist the soil stayed. I mean, it is very easy to just kick around, much better than over here. And this is the one row that did not have anything, and it's just hard and dry. This is much better than anything we've dealt with. The next thing we're going to do is burn all of this dead vegetation, corn stalks, the tomato plants, anything that was left over, a couple tree trimmings, and we're just going to burn that in the garden, and we'll rototill it in with the load of compost that I got.
I'll go grab the hose.
So you can see we got the compost spread out pretty evenly. My husband is getting the rototiller out, so we're going to start working this in, and while he does that, I'll explain what we're going to be doing with the garden this fall. So what we are doing this year is planting a cover crop in the garden. This is called hairy vetch. It is a legume. The plan is to get it planted in the next day or so, possibly even tonight, depending on how things go. We are hoping to get a decent crop just to do some nitrogen fixation in our soil, replenish some of the nutrients for next summer. The plan is not really to do anything with this legume. We're going to plant it in the spring. We'll mow it off, cover it with the garden plastic that we have, and just kind of let it decompose back into the soil. Hopefully at that point, we'll just be doing a no-till garden. So this is new to us. We're going to see how it goes, but we will show you our whole process. We're going to go ahead and smooth it out some with the rake just to even up a few of the low and high spots. While my husband's doing that, I'm going to move some of our herbs that I had planted along the garden. I'll explain why they were there and why I'm moving them, and then we're going to go ahead and get everything planted tonight. These are the herbs that I have planted. I've talked about them before in a video. We have sage, parsley, mint, chives, and basil. Originally, I had them all planted in pots and in my flower bed, and they were not doing well at all. Most of them were pretty much dead. So as a last-ditch effort to try and save them, we just threw them along the garden, and obviously they have all come back very well. It's not an ideal spot for them, so I'm going to get them moved up to a section on the other side of our yard with the other mint that we have, and hopefully they do okay being moved. We'll find out next spring if they come back or not. We have everything flattened out pretty well. I'd say it's pretty nice for what we're doing, just preparing the seed bed. We're going to get the broadcaster and spread the hairy vetch seed, and then we're going to use a rake to lightly move the soil around to get it all covered up. It's supposed to be planted 8 to 10 weeks before your first heavy frost, and with where we're at, we definitely are within that range, if not maybe a little further out. But we'll go ahead and get that planted. So we want to do roughly 1¼ pounds per 1,000 square feet. So we just eyeballed roughly that into our broadcaster. We're going to get this spread, we'll rake it in, and then we're going to water everything just to get it started and off to a healthy start. And we'll have to keep an eye on the weather and make sure that we keep up with watering it. We've been pretty lucky on getting enough rain here recently, so I'm not too worried about it. So I have all of the herbs up here. I'm just going to show you the root balls of each of them. This one is pretty healthy, a nice amount of roots. I'm really pleased with how well this one took off. The sage has a good bit of roots to it. It has died off a good bit. I don't know if this is going to come back. We'll just have to plant it and see what happens. Our chives have a massive amount of roots to it, and this has really taken off. I cut everything down to like an inch maybe a month or so ago, and it has all grown back, so it should be okay. Our basil has a small root system as well. Doesn't look as nice, but obviously it is growing well, so we'll see what happens with it. Our mint, on the other hand, is massive. I definitely cut off a good chunk of the root system, but this is just out of control. I'm gonna plant this regular mint near our chocolate mint and our apple mint, and we will see how they do. I'll have to keep them tamed back because obviously they kind of take over, but we're gonna go ahead and get these planted. So all of my herbs are planted here in between a couple elderberry bushes, and then over here we have the chocolate mint, our regular mint, and our apple mint. And then in between this section, this middle piece, and one way down on the end, we'll probably do flowers again in the spring. I haven't decided that yet. We will have to decide that in the spring. Not super concerned about it. I'm just glad I got these planted. Gonna give them all a good watering. We'll water the garden really well. And that's about it for fall cleanup for the garden. We'll keep you updated on how the hairy vetch does. And I think that's it. So thanks for watching. If you like it, be sure to hit the like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel.